Basically, marketing is one to many and sales is one to one. I think a lot of times because both sales and marketing are starting to morph a little bit as we get into this modern age, we forget the fundamentals of what they are and how they're different. And at the end of the day, sales is really a context for it. So sales and marketing have a great relationship. Marketing should be, and many the ones that do it right are out there educating the market and priming them of why they should care.
Hello, Sales Nation. I'm Will Barron, host of the Salesman Podcast, the world's most downloaded B2B sales show. In today's episode, we have the legend that is Jeff Davis. He is the author of Create Togetherness, the book. He is the host of the Alignment Podcast. On today's episode, we're looking at marketers, the seemingly arch enemy of sales professionals. We're looking at what they do well and what we can take from their processes to put into our sales process so that we can get more deals done and prospect more efficiently. Everything that we talk about is available in the show notes to this episode over at salesman.org. And with that, let's jump right into it. Jeff, welcome back to the Salesman Podcast.
Thank you, Will. It is really good to be back on the show. Thank you for inviting me again.
You're more welcome, sir. I'm glad to have you back. So today's show, we're diving into how we can perhaps think like more of a marketer as salespeople and then improve our sales prospecting results on the back of that. So let's start with the difference between sales and marketing. And Jeff, let me ask you this, mate. What are marketers doing that perhaps salespeople aren't doing? And then we can look at what we can pull from that and what we can start to leverage ourselves.
Sure. So when I get asked this question, I go back to the really old school definition of what sales is and what marketing are at a very, very core level. And basically, marketing is one to many and sales is one to one. I think a lot of times because both sales and marketing are starting to morph a little bit as we get into this modern age, we forget the fundamentals of what they are and how they're different. And at the end of the day, sales is really a context for it. So I know you've had Craig Wortman on the show many times, I think several times. Mm-hmm. And he always says that like sales is a context work, and it really is true. If you're not having one-on-one conversations, they're not selling, period. So I think the difference is that, marketers innately think on a macro level. And so I think one of the things, and we'll probably get into it in our conversation, that salespeople can take from that is how do you zoom out for a bit to make sure that your time and energy that you're putting out there is being done in an efficient and effective way.
So if a salesperson is having a conversation to presumably get a deal done, what are marketers doing speaking to thousands or tens of thousands of people other than us selfishly as salespeople think and assume that all they're doing is trying to push funnel and push pipeline and push individuals and prospects towards us?
Yeah, when done right, when sales and marketing have a great relationship, marketing should be, and the ones that do it right are out there educating the market and priming them of why they should care, right? A lot of times what salespeople's frustrations are, they're in an organization that either doesn't have a marketing department or doesn't have an effective marketing department, is they feel they're always re-educating prospects on why they should care, or they're trying to hook them to get them on the phone to tell them why they should care. So a really robust marketing team that is really supporting sales in a meaningful way is creating this platform that says you should care about our product solution because of XYZ. This is the value we bring you, and here is the cost of inaction. So that by the time me as a salesperson, I get on the phone, I may touch on those things, but like you have a good idea of why or what value I bring you. Now, as a salesperson, I then have to personalize that and make it about your business and talk about like what your unique industry is, how I see, us working together. That's when the one-on-one connection starts to happen.
And let me get into this into a little more detail, because I've only ever really worked in sales roles, not necessarily mega corporations, but large organizations that all of my customers, the surgeons that I was selling to medical device sales, they all loved the products, the equipment. And so in my mind, there's often a massive disconnect because of all the marketers locally within the UK element of these organizations. Well, the one organization, they only had one marketer, a multi-billion-dollar organization, and he spent most of his time doing polishing up presentations and making them look pretty, as opposed to what I think we're talking about here, which is priming an audience, priming a marketplace that when a salesperson calls, they've got that bit of brand awareness and that side of things. So I guess there's multiple layers of marketing. There's good marketers, there's bad marketers, and there's everything in between, right? So with that said, if we're in a sales role right now, how do we know if our marketers in our organization are doing a good job, and whether we should then try and lean into them, or whether we look at this and go, well, this is a bit of a shit show. Maybe I should do some of this on my own.
Well, it's a tough question, right? And here's why it's a tough question. I run into a lot of people, especially in industries like industrial products and manufacturing, and many of them are just now getting to this whole digital disruption and understanding how it applies to their business. So I'm very careful to say good or bad marketers. Many times, and I've had this conversation with many marketing leaders, that they want to do more strategic initiatives, but the organization doesn't recognize the strategic value of marketing. They only see the tactical value, which is website updates, sales collateral, those very tactical things. So let's start there. A lot of marketers want to do more, but do not feel empowered to do more. So I would say I would I would approach that question in a little bit different way of, as a salesperson, how can you think more like a marketer? How can you best leverage the tools and resources they're providing you? And sometimes you do kind of have to like take what they give you and make it your own, right? Maybe things like, I often say, especially for salespeople, when I'm talking about being on social, the way that you're on social and the way that you communicate on social, you have to realize you're not having a one-on-one conversation. And so many times that's not a salesperson's natural language. If you have a solid website or you have like marketing collateral you think is good, use some of that language and put it out on LinkedIn to say like, hey, XYZ people that are looking for this solution, here's a great article for blah, 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 blah. But that language is different than me having a phone conversation with you as a one-on-one prospect. So I always position it as, what is marketing doing that you can leverage in a way that gets you in front of the people you need to get in front of?
Let me ask you this, and I don't know your opinion on it. And in the sales training industry and thought leadership industry, it's all over the place. Should salespeople be on social media speaking one to many, or should they be leaving that to marketers where appropriate, or where marketers could do that?
Yeah. So it depends, right? Let's start there. If you're in a highly regulated, well, let me back up. Yes. The simple question is yes. You
Okay.
absolutely should be. The reason I say that, and I'll circle back to this, is that in order to cut through the noise in B2B today, you really have to position yourself as a subject matter expert.
Mhm.
And we have to go beyond just showing up and talking about features and benefits, and really come to the table as vying for being a trusted advisor, right? And so in order to do that, you've got to present yourself on social to your prospects that you know what you're talking about. Because here's the thing. If I get an email from Will Barron saying, hey, Jeff, I think we have da 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 da, what's the first thing I'm going to do? Who is this guy? I'm probably going to go to LinkedIn. I'm probably going to search about your company. I'm not going to just take your email for face value and assume that you know what you're talking about. So the short answer is yes. Now, in highly regulated industries, there is absolutely uh, there's concern about unleashing the salespeople, because there's this idea that they're lone wolves and they're going to go crazy, right?
Yeah.
I think you can even do that. I come from pharmaceuticals.
Mhm.
You know this very well. It's a highly regulated industry, finances as well. There is a way that marketers can frame up conversations for salespeople and give them guidelines, and I think it's absolutely their responsibility to say this is the sandbox we play in. Here are some templates and tools you can use. But I think that every salesperson in a meaningful way should be on social, and even if that's curating content. I got pushback from a lot of sales leaders, and you may have heard this in your time in sales training. I don't want my people on social media. They need to be making calls. And so my thing is this: I don't want to turn salespeople into a marketing agency. You don't need to be on there 8 hours a day, but 30 minutes, beginning of day, end of day, sharing content, making comments. I think it's absolutely a good use of your time as a salesperson.
So we actually had this happen in the past few weeks. So we've hired a customer success manager over at salesman.org, our training platform, and she didn't have a LinkedIn profile because she hadn't needed one in the past. I think the last organization she worked for she was in finance, so actively discouraging her from having social media profiles. And even I've got her on Facebook as a friend, a name on Facebook, she uses her middle name rather than her first name. So it's more difficult to track her down. My girlfriend's a doctor. She does that same. A lot of doctors do that. So patients can't find them. So we had a few people emailing, asking questions, and Sarah was going back and forth with them. And they thought it was some kind of scam, or there was something going on, because everybody got the email and then looked her up on LinkedIn and she wasn't there. I think she did have a LinkedIn profile, but it didn't have an actual picture of her and didn't really have any history or anything. It was just linked to her email address. And people were emailing me then saying, what the hell's going on with this? Is this a real person or not? So literally, if you're a salesperson, you don't have some kind of LinkedIn profile, not necessarily a Twitter, not necessarily even a Facebook. I think Facebook's probably, we might end up in that realm at some point of the world being so open that Facebook platform, it turns into more of it becomes more okay to discuss business on Facebook, but we're not there quite yet. But yeah, we've come into this as a business recently of now we're getting the video editor. Adam, I'm going to ask him to rebuild his LinkedIn profile. He's probably listening and watching this right now as he's editing this episode of the show. It's on the to-do list to get him to build out his LinkedIn profile and link to the business. And then the business page will have links to all the people within it, and it makes it look more and more legitimate. So with all that said, just as that quick anecdote and example there, Jeff.
And so I'm glad that you mentioned that. Not to cut you off, but one of the reasons that we built a LinkedIn course specifically for B2B sales and marketing folks, as well as entrepreneurs and small business owners, is for the very reason that you mentioned, is that we've gotten to a point where LinkedIn has become the Facebook of personal interaction. Like if you meet somebody and they're not on Facebook, you're like, what is wrong with them? Are they a serial killer? Like
Yep.
there's got to be something strange about them. But you're exactly right. Even if you are in a highly regulated industry, if I get communication from you, we are now going into LinkedIn to verify that you're a person and that you are who you are. And when you're not there, the assumption, to your point, what you just said, is that is this some fake profile? Is this person really real? So that's why we're launching a course very, very soon, just to help salespeople, especially B2B, just level up that they have a presence, and then obviously get guidance from their company if that's something they need to do.
Okay, so we'll link to the course in the show notes when it's ready as well in this episode of at salesman.org. So with that, Jeff, where I was going with that is you said in your own words, salespeople do not need to become a marketing agency, and they don't need to spend 8 hours a day on LinkedIn doing all kinds of marketing activity there. But where does the line get drawn? What should salespeople be doing on social media, on other platforms, marketing platforms, and the concepts of marketing in general? What should they be doing to improve their visibility and, again, in your words, to become a trusted advisor?
Yeah. So for me, the reason and the objective for salespeople to be on social is to start a conversation with their prospects, right? So salespeople need to be very laser focused on getting in front of the people that matter, the type of accounts that matter, and the customer personas, which salespeople use, but it's more of a marketing word, within those accounts that are their people, right? And so I don't need you talking to everybody. So let's say to your point, you're calling on hospitals and you need to talk to the director of finance and maybe procurement, whatever that looks like. You need to understand where those people are, how you get in front of them, make sure you're connected with them. And beyond just making sure that you are having a conversation, you also can do a lot of really good listening on LinkedIn and other social platforms, which people do not talk enough about on the sales side of the house. It's not always about churning out content and making sure that you're putting up a video a day. Sometimes it's going through and searching and seeing how people are connected and listening to the conversations, joining groups where your target audience are, and sometimes just reading. What are they concerned about? What are they talking about? What are the topics that are important to them? One thing I always do for my prospects is I look at the conferences that they're going to and attending, the most popular ones, and I'm looking at the subjects that they're talking about. And are they talking about things that I can engage them with to say, I know, the topic of, the legal ramifications of not doing your job is really important to you. Well, what's great about it is that our solution can help you with that. Let's have a conversation. That's purely based on, listening.
So I love this, and no one's ever put it like this on the show before. And tell me if I'm on the right tracks here, Jeff, but it seems like we should be on social media doing research. So salespeople should be doing research one-to-one, like they should be selling. And then marketers should be doing their own research, but perhaps one-to-many or by personas, and the market shifts and kind of widespread changes in the market. Whereas, as you said, salespeople should be researching for the actual individual and what they're doing each day. Is that about right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we can sometimes overthink what we should do. And I am a heavy LinkedIn user, so I use LinkedIn a lot, and I specifically focus on B2B. But we overthink it, right? Like LinkedIn is just another tool in the toolkit, just like the phone is for prospecting, email, one-to-one conversations. They're all tools in the toolkit. So think of it in that way of this is one other way that I can connect with my prospects. I can research them. I can reach out to them. I can present myself to them as an expert. That's all it is.
And is there a cadence for reaching out publicly, commenting on posts, or giving sharing links or feedback where appropriate, versus DMing people directly and actually setting up meetings and selling? Is there a cadence that we should be going between the two of them?
Yeah. So I was listening to this speaker, and his name escapes me, but he made a really good analogy. It's like being on LinkedIn is like dating. If you walk up to somebody and you just met them and be like, "Hey, do you want to go out?" It's weird, it's creepy, it just doesn't make sense. But that's essentially what people are doing when they're spamming people in DM and say like, "You don't know me, but we should get on the phone for 15 minutes
Yeah.
and talk about this solution." I'm like, I don't know who you are. So you have to be thoughtful of that. Like anytime I reach out to a new prospect or somebody I want to connect with, it's just to say, hey, I think what you're doing is interesting or whatever that is. I just want to connect and learn more about you. Start the relationship in that way. And once they accept, and hopefully they do, you can then do, as you alluded to, some more research to get into who they really are, what's important to them, and then pick up something that connects you. Hey, I noticed that you talked about this particular topic, and actually, I like that too, whatever that looks like, right? So the cadence is don't start off selling. I think that's what junior salespeople and people that are not really getting this platform is that you have to learn how to provide value up front first. Value, 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 then ask. One really good book, Gary Vee's book, I think it's Jab, 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 Right Hook,
Mhm.
right? It's essentially the same concept, right? Push out a ton of value, help people understand their problems, give them clarity, and then say, hey, now I want to talk to you about how my solution can help you.
I think that's brilliant, right? If we can, because it's gonna be different for every organization. There's deal size, the person that you're speaking to, but if you can wait until you've got a connection point, something that you go, oh, Jeff does this, I do this, or our organization focuses on this, you're going through this change. I know this sounds so so simple and daft, but just because I have to sell this way, I have to have these mental triggers of, okay, we've achieved this 0.7 in the process of we have now connected on XYZ. Now it's more not necessarily appropriate, because I'm up for people pushing the boundaries of what's appropriate to, if there's value to be given, if there's deals to get done. I'd rather push people to be more forward on things and be reserved and laid back and never actually get any deals done and get sacked 6 months later because you just got a big fat pipeline with people at the top of it and no one at the bottom. But that one point of, yeah, we do have this in common. We are trying to, the organizations do have the same pathway. That's a good trigger, right? For then moving it towards, let's jump on a 10-minute meeting.
Yeah, and to your point, right? Like I would agree with you. And you don't have to be. So let me step back. So I actually was giving a lecture, and one of the students asked, what's the difference or what's the line between persistent and pushy?" And I thought it was a really great question because she was new to sales, and she was like, "I feel a lot of times that I'm being pushing. I'm being pushed to be pushy." And I said, "Here's the difference. When you continue to reach out and you're adding value and you have a reason to reach out, that's persistence. And it's not just saying the same thing over and over and over again. When you provide no value and there's no reason for you to be reaching out and you're just saying, hey, I just want to put this at the top of your inbox, or hey, I don't know if you saw this, or hey, I reached out to you last week and I haven't heard back from you. That is pushy. But if you're continuing to add value in a different way, hey, here's a podcast that you may not be aware of. I saw this in the news and I think it's really important to your industry. When you're ready, let's have a conversation, or give them reasons that they should be talking to you. That is persistence. So for me, that is the difference.
And for context on here, Jeff, because I'm sure you get this just as much as what I do, if not more. What do you do when you get a really spammy message on LinkedIn where someone adds you and then immediately sends you a pitch and sends you a Calendly link to sign up for a 15-minute call? What's your process for dealing with that?
I just don't respond. I mean, so I mean that's the reality of things. Unless in the very off chance it's a really well crafted, short message that gives a clear line of sight for me to say there is something for me to talk to you about, then on the off chance that that happens, yes. But the reality of things is a lot of times as salespeople, we put the onus on the prospect to connect the dots on why they should care. And we are busy. People are inundated with messages. You have to make things super crystal clear of why I should care.
I delete the people. I literally remove them. And I've
Yeah.
been mentally, I've not documented this and done data on it, but mentally I've been keeping track of it. And I don't necessarily think it's brand new people to sales. Age is a number. I appreciate that. And you could be 54 and just got your first sales job. But if you're 54 and you're working in a sales job, you'll probably be working in that role for a number of years. And I find a lot of these one-off spam messages are from men and women who are in the 40s and 50s rather than a 21-year-old who's just getting the teeth sunk into sales, which tells me that perhaps these people are not new to sales, but perhaps they're new to LinkedIn. So with that said, So with that said, we'll shift the conversation slightly as we wrap up here, Jeff. But how important through all of this is to how much of these issues are resolved by continuously learning and training in sales? How important is that to have success?
It's extremely important because what I think that we have to realize is now we've gotten to a point where we have so much technology, and I think the generational thing is definitely at play here. But we as consumers, we as buyers have become more savvy. And in addition to that, LinkedIn has transformed, right? Back in the day, LinkedIn was purely like put your resume up and this is how you get a job. The platform has changed. And so not if you're not active and really engaged with it, you may not know that. And so it's this weird thing that like you have to remind people to interact with these tools in a human way because everybody understands how to use them. We understand the nuance of it. And now it's not me communicating on a social media platform. It's me actually talking to you. It feels like I'm actually
Mhm.
talking to you. And so when we think about it in that way, is would sending a spam message out to 20,000 people make sense in an everyday context? And if the answer is no, which the answer is no, then don't do it. And the reason that people are continuing to do it because for a long time it did work because we were getting used to the platform. The platform meant something different, and so it's just that doesn't work anymore. So to answer your point more clearly and crystally, we have to continue to train our salespeople on how to leverage these tools not only in a effective way but in a cohesive way, so it becomes a part of their toolkit and not just a one-off. It should be all connected and all cohesive.
Are there any tools that marketers are using that salespeople should be using, or at least have access to the data that their marketing team is using it for, if that makes sense?
Oh, that's a good question. Off the top of my head, I'm careful to go down that rabbit hole because then we'll add more stuff on top of sales reps um, s- sales stack, so to say. I actually am a huge proponent of actually getting rid of it. I think that we've gotten to the point where we have so many tools that it's actually causing salespeople to be overwhelmed and not as effective. So in my book, I talk about the fact that for sales leaders, especially, is to do an audit on what systems you are requiring your salespeople to use because InsideSales.com, which is now Zant, actually did a study and they found that 36.6% of a sales rep's time is actually focused on doing revenue generating activities. So literally, majority of a sales rep time is doing non-sales related activities, and I think a lot of that is to the cumbersome of all the sales tools. So I am a huge proponent of like stripping back tech, using the stuff that works, and getting that out of the way of sales reps so they can actually have those one-on-one conversations versus all the other bells and whistles.
Because I know clearly, depending when you listen to this, we're either through it, the middle of it, or everything's gone to absolute crap and there's turmoil. But we're going through this pandemic crisis at the moment. So I've battened down the hatches with our, I just went through all of our bank statements and accounts and just got rid of anything that wasn't necessary to survive. And I got rid of like £600 worth of monthly fees for software tools that are useful, but is it more useful than perhaps that doesn't pay a member of staff, but it could help towards members of staff, or if buyers are not purchasing right now, or it could cover insurance costs, whatever it costs, building costs. And it blew my mind. £600 a month. We're just not necessarily wasting because some of the tools are useful, but they're not immediately necessary. We could survive fine without them.
Yeah, and you'll be surprised how many times you do an audit between sales and marketing tech, which is even more complicated because stereotypically they're buying tech in silos. right?
Mhm.
And then trying to make them work on in some way, that how many redundancies you get, how many tools that like we're paying for memberships and didn't even know we were, how many that we have are not really giving us data or have any value. So I encourage people, to your point, especially sales leaders, to like do an audit and say like, what tools are giving my salespeople the most valuable data that they can then use to make smart business decisions. And those are the ones that you should keep and prioritize.
And you feel free to mention names, brands, whether you're affiliated with them or not, it doesn't matter. But other than LinkedIn Navigator or Sales Navigator for LinkedIn, wherever the branding is, and perhaps a tool to uncover email addresses, Lead IQ, Seamless.ai, there's a whole host of them. What are there any other must-have tools for sales professionals other than a phone and a pen and paper on top of that?
This is a tough one because I think it depends on industry. I will say, uh, I always hate this question because there's so many right now. So the ones that come top of mind, a lot of
Well,
the
let
sales
me ask you a
intelligence.
different way then. If you've been asked that question
Yeah.
before, for yourself, what could you personally not live without?
Well, Calendly is definitely one. So any tools that make that scheduling process easier, absolutely. I think now, especially
Mhm.
webcam, Zoom, Skype, whatever that is, obviously. What other tools are really good? I would also say too, going back to your earlier question, some of the larger ones like Core.ai is a great one that provides a lot of value. Seismic is another one that provides a lot of value. Because for my biggest thing that I feel like right now we need to focus on is, especially as a marketer, how do we get account level intelligence into the hands of sales reps so they can have more empowered conversations and interactions. So whatever tools allow us to do that, I'm in huge support of. So I don't necessarily focus on all the bells and whistles, and there's a
Mhm.
lot of bells and whistles that are great and provide value. But I think at the end of the day, what separates a really, really high functioning sales team is those sales reps that have a ton of really compelling data about the account.
Got it. That makes total sense. Okay, Jeff, one last question to wrap up the show, mate. A bit of a different question as we're going through, again, this global pandemic at the moment. So without dwelling on that, how do you think sales, other than the obvious of probably more people working from home and remote meetings, how do you think sales is going to change over the next 1 to 3 years following this crisis that we're going through?
It's interesting. It's a really interesting question. I think one of the things that I've seen that has been a really good, I mean, I use that word carefully,
Sure.
outcome of this is that we are learning to increase our empathy in sales and become truly customer centric because kind of we're being forced to. I think a lot of people give lip service to being customer centric, and it's just a word, right? Like, one perfect example, I've had clients before and they're like, we're customer centric, we're all about the customer. And I'm like, well, I went to your website and at no point does it talk about the customer, it's all about you. And while that's just a proxy, it's that sort of thing that's like, even if you feel like you are customer centric, me coming to your website, I don't feel like you care about me or that you understand my needs. So I think empathy will definitely increase. I think that we'll understand too how to use these tools like Zoom and LinkedIn in a more human way, because we're not in the office. We are becoming digitally native, and so I think our skill level will increase, that when we do get back in offices, which is hopefully sooner than later. I think we'll be able to understand how to use these tools in a much more efficient and effective way. So those are the kind of the two things I've been seeing, um, in the immediate, kind of urgency of like being out of the office and trying to make things work.
Do you think we need to be in an office after all of this winds down? Do you think that, I'm not necessarily, I assume you're not talking about the boiler room sales office, more like the modern productive office, but how much more productive is an office versus people working from home when people get used to it and they're trained on how to perform better in that environment?
Yeah, for me, back when I was a salesperson, I think there is a value, especially for inside sales, BDRs, that sort of thing, to have a camaraderie with other people, to ask
Sure.
questions like, "Hey, how does this work for you?" And I don't think you can get that in the same way that you can at home. And so I do think that there is value in coming back into the office. I think what we'll have learned is how to be more effective with the collective digital package that we have to use, the Zoom, the LinkedIn, and how they all work. And we'll be able to orchestrate these much more, I think, fluid conversations, right? But I think there definitely is something to being in the office, being with your peers, being able to ask the sales manager, hey, I don't think that went well. Can you go over this with me? And you can't do that same thing with a phone call or even a Zoom call. So I think there's value with us being, to your point, not boiler room necessarily,
Yep.
but being amongst your peers just to get feedback and to ask questions.
Got it. That makes total sense. I'm insulated from some of this. I've sold and worked from home and built this business for the past like 6-7 years without any office space, and we're looking to proactively get office space. Hopefully, it's going to be cheap as shit over the next few months. So we're going to look at
This is probably the time to buy.
yeah. And I know it's terrible climate and everything that's going on is horrible, but business goes on, and we're looking at scooping something up soon.
I would say there's opportunity and disruption, and I can't think of a more disruptive period right now. So that's just the reality of things.
The reality of things. Good. I like the way to wrap that up. Jeff, with that, mate, tell us where we can find out more about you, and tell us a little bit about the book as well.
Sure. So the book is Create Togetherness. This guy right here. Hopefully you'll check it out. The URL is createtogethernessbook.com. It talks all about how you can develop a strategic roadmap to helping marketing and sales work together in a different way and help each be more effective in connecting with the modern buyer. We talked a lot about the changes that have happened in the modern buying process. And I encourage all the sales reps that are listening, or even the sales leaders, is we've had this consumerization, especially on the B2B side of the house, of like, you got to think about how you buy things and then apply that to how you connect with your prospects, because that's what's happening, right? So again, createtogethernessbook.com. And then you can find more about me at meetjeffdavis.com. All of my information about speaking, the upcoming course on LinkedIn, increasing your influence on LinkedIn, will be posted there. And then last but not least, you can always find me on LinkedIn, Jeff Davis. I know you'll put that in the notes. I'm always open for people if you have questions. Please feel free to reach out, whether they be minor or big. But I always try to help out as much as I can. So those are the 3 best ways to connect with Jeff Davis.
Good stuff. And I encourage you, Sales Nation, everyone listening, to reach out to Jeff and quiz him on some of this stuff if you've got more questions, because he will give you better answers than what I will, if you ask me. And with that, Jeff, I want to thank you again for your time. I hope you and your family and everyone's safe throughout this, as well as the listeners as well. And thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
You as well, and stay safe as well.